All right. Like I said, we're having a sustainable conversation this morning, and we're looking at how gender justice and climate resilience can end hunger. Insights from the 2024 GHI report. And joining us for that conversation this morning is Dr. Mary Ngendo Kanui, who is a social scientist and International Rice Research Institute. Good morning.
Good morning.
Karibu sana and welcome.
Asante.
Kassim Lupao is a Senior Technical Advisor, Health and Nutrition at Concern Worldwide. Kassim, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Good to have both of you in the hot seats of the Situation Room this morning. Ending hunger has been a big deal when it comes to conversations that we have around development circles. But before we get into that proper, CT is going to welcome you with today's proverb. And we'd like you, as though ending hunger is not enough work to do, to tell us about what you would think about this particular proverb and how you would interpret that. Is that all right?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, our proverbs for the whole of this week ending. Today is the end of the month, isn't it?
Yes.
So February is done and dusted, at least at the end of today. Right. Have been from the Republic of Mali, a wonderful country with an extremely rich history. Today being Friday, the proverb we have is simple, straightforward, easy to understand, and easy to interpret. The proverb: if you have an enemy, admit he can run faster. Now, clearly, if you don't have an enemy, that is this proverb may not be very relevant, but let's assume somebody you know who has an enemy. Perhaps they should admit that the enemy can run fast. If you have an enemy, admit he can run faster.
Let's start with you, Kassim. What would you think?
I thought ladies first.
Wow, here it's Friday. It's the end of the month. Let's turn it up and do things totally different. Okay.
Hey, that's all right.
Okay.
Fine. I can interpret it simply, like it's about an enemy, and just acknowledging that an enemy has more strength than you have, and therefore you need to put some mechanisms in place to mitigate that. And if you acknowledge that, then you will plan in advance and make sure that you run faster than the enemy.
Okay. Good.
All right. What comes to mind is more about acknowledging your blind spots. And that in most cases, an enemy knows things about you that you're probably either you're unaware of or you just take for granted, meaning that they've really studied you inside out. So being aware of your blind spots and anticipating that it might go either way. So planning for any adverse situations arising. So that way you're able to adapt, able to run faster if you can, as Kassim is saying, or run away also is also an option.
Evidently, the two of you have come across enemies. Because when somebody gives an interpretation that is that appropriate, they're drawing it from experience.
Okay. It's coming from somewhere, that's for sure. All right, let's start off with you, Dr. Hilary. Dr. Mary. And even as we look at the hunger situation around the world, and we're saying, okay, fine, there's the hunger problem, there's a need to end it, and that there are very many different players in this arena to say the end of hunger is somewhere in sight, but we're all making attempts towards that. And we're looking at two particular players here. Now we're looking at, the part of gender justice, and we're also then looking at climate resilience towards ending hunger. Give us an overview of, first of all, where we are in this race. We have this conversation every year, and maybe a little bit more frequently. But with those players, where are we towards this race?
All right. Thank you for the question. So it's a big one because food insecurity, and I might need to add food and nutrition insecurity, it's not a silo. So there are very many players, as you rightly put, as also many determinants that place one at the position they're in. So I'm going to speak in the case of Kenya, where we sit in the global context. So with the Global Hunger Index that we'll delve in during the rest of the conversation, it's done annually because it's not... Yes, ideally the point is to end, but on your stages there, it's to alleviate, make it less and less as we go along. So right now we are still not doing so well in Kenya, but from the report, at least for the last, I think the last 20 years or so, it's moved from alarming to serious, which is a slight progress. But still, in terms of the absolute numbers, we are 100 out of, I think, 126 thereabouts. So, as you can see, still not doing so well. But having said that, there are steps that are being made. And you also put in the other factors in terms of intervening variables. There is climate change that is getting worse, that is also weakening the system. So you might be doing well, but there are other factors that are impinging on that. So there's climate change, which also now creates the need for being more, ideally to mitigate, but also to adapt and also to be more resilient to the changes that are inevitable as we move forward. Also, the concept of the gender inequality and equity that comes across, hence the need for gender justice, among other factors. So food and nutrition security does not sit in a silo. It's an ecosystem that there are very many inflows and outflows that determine the number we are in, 100.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that for now.
For now.
Yeah.
All right. So when we look at climate resilience, maybe from your end, Kassim, how do we connect climate resilience towards a futuristic goal of ending hunger?
Okay, thank you. Climate resilience is a very critical phenomenon, and you realize that in the recent past we have been experiencing climate change, and therefore a couple of things are happening as a result of the same. And because of climate change, you find that food production has gone down. For instance, if I look at the impacts of climate change, and if I can quote an example, say drought. Drought has caused, say, loss of livestock for the communities that practice livestock keeping. And in other communities as well, food production has gone down in terms of effects of climate change. And therefore, climate resilience comes in whereby we need to adapt to the situation at hand. And therefore, what is very critical is what do we do in terms of the situation. And what you can do is engaging in climate smart agriculture technologies in order to mitigate and take us to where we want to get to. And that is targeting zero hunger. And as my colleague had mentioned, it's good to mention also that the target globally was for us to get to zero hunger by 2030. And as Dr. Mary clearly said, we are not on track. So we are off the track. And one of the biggest contributor is the impact of climate change. And therefore, climate resilience and how we try to mitigate the effects of climate change comes in handy to ensure that we achieve food and nutrition security by that year. Thank you.
Let me ask this simple question. Does the planet produce enough food?
That's a really good question. I'd say yes and no. Why do I say that? Because food and nutrition security is not necessarily only about food production. Of course, it's a big chunk, but you can have food available, but how do you look at accessibility and utilization? So for instance, when there's no maize in Kenya, we say we are hungry, but that's not the situation. There's cassava, there's yams, there are other foods that are available. But maybe how we are culturalized is that if there's no maize, If there's no ugali at dinner, there's no food. But that's not the case. So that's why I'm saying it's yes and no. Because there are also other foods that are available that are not necessarily being utilized. Having said that, the utilization aspect comes, as I said, socio-culturalization and also the preference of people and desirability. So in that context, why maybe another answer would be yes, when we are maybe deficit in maize, of course we'd need to bump that one up. Because the production could go lower because maybe the rains have failed, of course also the tax tariffs, the imports, exports. So it's, how would I say it? It's a nexus. It's not one thing. So it's not just production. You need to look at accessibility and utilization.
So we've made a simple concept complex.
Because that's the reality on the ground.
Is it really? Because that actually is my question. And I asked it in that way because the heart of what we are saying is not something that is beyond simple understanding. Yes. Most farmers in this country, if you're talking numerically, are small-scale farmers, subsistent farmers as they are called. But we find ourselves in a situation where subsistence farmers can't feed themselves now. How did that come about? And yet, it's not as though the land doesn't exist. People have less of it. But what happened? The very thing that could be done, not very long ago, by people who are far less educated, those are our grandparents and so forth, something that they did and they did successfully. Now, with everything that we say we have, we're saying it can't be done. How?
Good point. I'll share my thoughts, and Kassim, you also welcome to join in to chime in as well. Sure. So one of the key aspects you notice from before and right now, of course, there's a lot of land subdivision. That's one aspect that what was happening in the past, our grandparents and they were able to. Nowadays, we are not. Because the more you subdivide, the more actually you're lessening on the quality. The other aspects come in terms of that, in terms of the food production. That is, the stability of it is shaken, so to speak. But having said that, still in the past, you'll still see the production system the way we will do traditional, say, like if it is in silos, you'll dry. I'll give the example of the maize because that's what's most common in Kenya for most people in terms of the starchy staples. So you'd have granaries where, or maybe just out traditionally. Nowadays, you even see, maybe a few months when maybe there's a lot of avocado right now. Or even in northern Kenya, there's a lot of rain, there's a lot of production. 1 month, you have a flux and then lack of post-harvest storage and the like.
Exactly.
Or not embracing our traditional ways, what our grandparents used to do. So now you have a flux and then you'll even find the dogs are the ones that are eating the too many avocados at one go. What has happened? In the past, there used to be ways of working around it. Or you could decide for that particular month, we are eating this because there's much of it at the moment. Nowadays also you bring in urbanization. That's why I'm saying it will be nice if it's simpler, but also the complexity of the dynamics. You have urbanization that has come in. How would you say it? Also the fragmentation of the land, that small land or the land that was there during our grandparents right now has been divided. Say if it's a family of, there are 12 siblings. So you're each dealing with an micro. So, of course, it will not be enough as it was in the past.
Because even if you look further, there is, you alone spoke about nutrition. There's one thing having the surplus, which, of course, you're saying people are saying they're hungry, but there are alternatives to what they're saying if maize is not there. But there's another thing, having a nutritious meal. And you just can keep sticking on cassava because that's what is surplus. And I think Kassim was supposed to give his comments on that, but I was just adding to the fact that there could be surplus, all right? But is it nutritious value to the human?
Exactly. And then I think that's what Kassim now will delve in, because also you have hidden hunger as well.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, so first of all, let me chime in and add to what he was mentioning and basically bring out perhaps what is not happening right before I can come in to the hidden hunger issue. One thing we must agree is, first of all, up to 40% of the people that are engaged in agri-food industry, they are women. However, you find that these women have not been properly empowered and given the resources they require so that they can optimally engage in production. And I know we have a very progressive constitution which gives equal rights to land ownership between both men and women. However, we are yet to realize that. I know there is very good evidence from the Food and Agriculture Organization detailing that if we are able to empower women and even the youth with the necessary resources or even equal resources that men have, then we can see production even double, and we can bring down this challenge of hunger significantly.
Okay.
Yes.
Allow me to double click on that just a little bit.
Yes.
So just make the connection, a clear one, between this gender justice that we speak about and then how we look at sustainable food production. That if we say if women had access to the same resources that a man does, what are those resources then that would ensure that hunger is not an issue?
Good. Thank you. So these resources, number one, I talked about land. Land ownership is an issue. We are more of a patriarchal society, and it is men that own land, majority of them. The other resource would be access to credit facilities. Engaging in food production requires money resources, which most of the women do not have. For example, if they are to access credit and on the flip side, they do not even own land. So like they cannot use a title deed, for example, as a collateral to get loans. So if we can have an easier way of accessing credit to women so that they can engage in food production, that would be good. I know we have very good policies in the country. I know, for instance, we have the climate smart agriculture strategy, which is very progressive and allows inclusion of women and the youth. So, when you're talking about gender, it's not only the women.
Of course.
Youth also have a very good role to play in this. And a lot is happening. I know as organizations, we are doing what we can in our own small ways, supporting the youth, supporting the women to access certified seeds, the tools that they can use in food production, and just supporting them, giving them the financial literacy, such that, the first priority is that when they produce, that food is supposed to be utilized at household level to take care of the nutrition security issues. And then the surplus is what now they can use to develop themselves. And we are coming up with things to do with the savings, loaning, and such facilities. And we are seeing a good progress. I know many people have done this. Even Safaricom Foundation, for example, is doing a very good job around Ngong area with the youth, and they are engaging in climate smart agriculture technologies, and we are seeing very good results. So, if we can put these policies into action, then for sure we can realize good results in terms of bringing down the challenge of hunger.
What do these good results look like?
Okay. These good results is in terms of, number one, increased food production. Production that is adequate to feed the population. But again, you see, we bring in also the diversity of what is being produced. And I know later on, if you give me some time, I'll try to dissect some numbers from the GHI report and what those numbers mean. Because, again, access to food does not necessarily mean that you are taking in what your body requirements needs. So there are those dynamics as well.
Okay. Ankey, you wanted to ask a question? Let's do that before we go
on
break.
We come back.
Just go ahead. Yeah.
All right, because I really wanted to hear your definition of hidden hunger. It's something I've never heard before. And I was looking forward to that so that the rest of us can also understand what is this hidden hunger. Do I have it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Fine. We have people of different physiological status. So a man, a woman, and even a woman, you could be having a pregnant woman or a woman who is breastfeeding. So their needs are not the same. So and even a child who is under the age of 5 years. So basically, you could be eating some food, but it's not meeting your body requirements. So, for instance, you could be missing on some what we call micronutrients. For instance, the food could be meeting some part of the macronutrients, but there are micronutrients that you are missing just because of the kind of food you are taking. And in the GHI, there is an indicator about undernourishment. And undernourishment is basically that population of people that are taking food that is not adequate in terms of both macro and the micronutrients that they need.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're looking at the Global Hunger Index Report 2024, and we're looking at where we are this morning. Dr. Mary Ngendo Kanui and Kassim Lupao are our guests this hour. When we talk about hunger, we talk about that. We hear that feeling of I need to put something in my belly so that I stop feeling that way. But what we're hearing said over and over again is that hunger means also the quality of food that you're getting, the sustainability of those sources of that food that we are getting. So it's an all-rounded thing. You talked about us now getting from the stage where it was alarming to serious. Which is worse, alarming or serious? Serious, alarming. Alarming is worse. It's really bad, and serious is okay. Serious. Okay, so now we've come from alarming to serious. Now, when you say we, who is we? Where are we? The world? Are we looking at Africa? Who is now serious coming from alarming?
So that's Kenya's, to be specific. Yes. So 100 out of 127. 127.
Wait.
Yes.
100 out of 120. So
100 out of 127.
So essentially, if it was an exam and 120 is 100%, so us we're at 100.
Is it a rank or is it a percentage?
That's a rank.
Yeah.
So the percentage will be 100 out of 127.
127. So we're 100. So if we're to be positive, we're saying we are quite near the top, isn't it? But if we're looking at what it is that you mean, we're doing very badly.
Yes, because we are 27 from the bottom.
From the bottom, yes. Meaning 127 is the bottom, and we are 100.
We are number 100, eh?
100.
Okay, so what are the factors that determine this? We're looking at there's not, in terms of adequacy, there's not enough food to go around. Are we saying that the sources of food are dwindling? Are we saying that the quality of food is not at 100%? What are the factors that would put Kenya at 100 out of 127?
Or as Kenyans, are we saying that they didn't work this thing out properly? That in fact,
perhaps they need to be visited.
We need to look at this thing properly and probably look at the server to understand whether these figures are actually correct. What are we saying?
I'm seeing Kassim is eager to you can start and then
Okay, fine. Initially, I had wanted to put the numbers into context so that our listeners and viewers can also understand what we are talking about. Because the Global Hunger Index basically is a tool that helps us to classify and even track issues of hunger. And the tool looks at 4 indicators. And I know you were talking about which one is good. So I know the numbers range from 0 upwards, and the good number is supposed to be 0. So 0, when that's the number we are targeting, 0 hunger. So when the numbers go up, it means we are doing badly. And maybe just to put the numbers into context, numbers ranging from 9.9 coming down, the hunger situation is classified as low. And then 10 to 19.9, the hunger situation is classified as medium. And then from 20 to 34.9 is what is considered serious. And that is where Kenya is at the moment. From the 2024 GHI report, we are at 25, and you can see we are in that range of serious. But now from 35 up to 49.9, then that is the alarming classification. And then numbers from 50 and above, then we call that extremely alarming. So I needed to make that distinction so that at least we have that into perspective, and so that now we move. And then the GHI looks at 4 indicators. The first one is undernourishment. And undernourishment means the proportion of people that are not getting adequate caloric intake. So you could be getting some amount of food, but in terms of calories that you require, they are not adequate.
Okay, so what are adequate calories? Let's just look at that now. For man, woman, obviously they're different, but what should you be getting every day?
If I can just say, sorry.
You're fine.
Sorry, in summary, an adult requires 2,700 kilocalories per day.
Okay.
So that would be adequate. Yes.
Okay. So, Daktari, I just want to jump off of that, right? So, we can say undernourishment, some of the numbers that we look at that would now contribute to these bigger numbers that we speak of. So, if one is not getting the proper caloric intake, and how would they know? You see, because we contribute, and we assume a lot of times that hunger and poverty go hand in hand. But if we're saying that one of the elements of hunger is that you're not getting the adequate caloric intake, that for me cuts across the strata, whether you're, poor or not, that you could actually be able to buy food, but you are still hungry because you're not getting what you need. So what are some of those things? Can we not just eat ugali and beans every day and be fine?
The simple answer is no.
Okay.
No, we cannot.
Okay.
And sometimes the manifestation shows up in different ways. As Kassim was saying, the physiological aspect. So what you notice, sometimes I'll actually give an example of myself. I've been through that in terms of anemia. So for women, you'll realize like iron, we have higher iron needs as compared to men, especially women in reproductive age. So like for me, how it presented itself was extreme fatigue. And this time you're studying nutrition, you're in this sector, you think you know everything like in terms of paper, but when, as you said, that and practice, those are 2 different elements that does not necessarily translate. So how I found out was during when I went for a hospital for a doctor's visit, and then when they checked the numbers, your iron levels are way below. And that time I transitioned to pseudo-vegetarian diet, and that was the aspect, because you lack the if you don't take the animal source foods, which is an extra requirement, especially for women, and now also with the westernized diet and with the trends of being vegetarian, you are lacking the heme iron that can only be found in animal source foods.
What, milk, meat, eggs?
No, actually the
fish,
like the red meat.
Flesh.
Okay,
The
flesh.
The flesh meat that has heme iron. And yes, you can take your spinach, you can take your others, but all vegetables, they have the non-heme iron that would work well for a man, but for a woman, because of the menstruation, it's not enough. So such subtle things. Sometimes it could be easy to show. Like, for example, with kwashiorkor, marasmus in children, you can see. Yeah. But sometimes, especially for adults, it could be through those checks. You realize. Another one during COVID, vitamin D deficiency.
Right.
You're like, oh, wow.
Is that the hidden hunger that Ankey is really worried about here?
Because you're looking at the iron, you're looking at the minerals and the vitamins.
Yes.
That's hidden hunger, the micronutrients.
So it's possible that we have a lot of folks who are walking around here hungry and we just assume that they're okay.
Yes.
And do these all contribute to these numbers that we're talking about that come out in the GHI report?
Sure.
Okay.
Though I need to, I would imagine, like, again, it's a representative sample. It's not the total population.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe.
Ankey, you were dying to ask something.
No, it's because you mentioned women. And in that comparison, I just jumped into something called gender justice. I was really curious about it. If it's playing a role in whichever way. So I was really going to bring us into what exactly is this thing I keep hearing about gender justice.
I'm glad you asked. Yes, it plays a role. And with the GHI, every year they have a different theme because, as we said, food and nutrition security, there are so many factors that are playing a role. So for 2024, it was on gender justice as well as climate resilience.
Okay.
So more specifically, when you zoom into gender justice, it's equity in all spheres of life. And I've said equity, not equality, because people use it interchangeably, but those are two very different terms. So ideally, at the end of the day, we'd like a world where everything is sort of equal, but that's not the reality we are living in. Hence the word equity. So equity is, let me start with equality, what people maybe use a lot. We say gender equality, but that's not actually what we like, because equality is equal playing field. But then we are not all starting at the same starting point. So actually, if you give the similar resources, similar opportunity, we'll actually end up differently because we are not all starting at the same starting point. So hence now the gender justice, equity in all spheres of life. Equity means you look at the needs and the constraints for each particular group you're dealing with, and then you enable them to overcome it.
Okay.
So that means that, for example, maybe again in the playing field example, if you maybe need to see a player maybe across a window, so one will be taller, so maybe they'll need a really smaller ladder. One will be really short, they need a bigger one. That's what we mean by equity.
So what's the role of that in combating hunger? Because that's really the major concern here.
Exactly. So again, it leads to what Kassim was trying to say a bit earlier on, because out of this, you realize, as a caveat, women is not gender, because it's roles and responsibilities. But having said that, women are comprising up to 40% of this productive age that are in farming. And also, as you said, in the terms of agriculture, again, majority are smallholder farmers, majority of whom again are women. So, and these are the ones who are having roles, not only productive roles in terms of food production, but also reproductive roles as well. So that's again coming back to gender justice, because one thing that we've not mentioned that again is in the burden of women who are supposed to also be farming, they're the ones who are in charge of taking care of younger babies in most cases, the reproductive role. Something as simple as breastfeeding, unpaid care work. That is not accounted for in terms of the math because you're at home. But then these are the same people who are supposed to be doing the farm work or even selling in farms. So that's where now the gender start looking at these needs and the constraints. So a woman is breastfeeding, which takes up to 30% of mental energy, which is maybe us in this sedentary, in the office, we consume up to 20%. That woman breastfeeding is consuming 30%. And she's still expected to now, after finishing that role, come take care of the family, go to the farm if she's in the rural area farming. So that's where understanding the needs and the constraints that the different populations are facing, so that they can, if they can be supported, they are now better able to contribute reproductively, and hence lead to increased food availability, which will in turn is a parcel, but will be a big chunk in terms of food and nutrition security.
Okay.
So that's how all of those are connected.
What have we seen so far that has worked? The problem has been identified.
Yes.
There's a solution that is being suggested. The woman is being aided, or at least attempts have been made. What have we seen to work so that this ideal that we're looking
can be
towards, we've seen signs of it being achieved?
I can start, and Kassim, feel free to chime in. So I look at both, not only rural but also urban women. I'll speak for myself. I'm actually a breastfeeding mother. Something as simple as a creche being available at work, a breastfeeding station, whereby I'm still working, but there is 30 minutes where I can quickly pump my milk, go back to work. Or even remotely, even this remote working has really assisted. In the first maybe 3 months, even right now, you can be attending a meeting. I'm still breastfeeding. I'm contributing productively, but I'm also taking care of the other needs as well. So something as simple as that, having work environments that are conducive for both men, it could be easier, but for women, so that we can still equally participate, because we are capable economic agents as well. But we might need different assistance at different stages. Like in my case, as a lactating mother, what will I need so that I can still be productive at work, still achieve, not having a hindrance because XYZ is not there, I cannot contribute. For girls, even in school, something like sanitary towels provision, so that on those days they are not missing from school. Yeah, so that's in the urban setup. In the rural areas, something as, for example, where I work at IRRI, one of the things we've been trying to do with rice farmers, you realize that the equipments can be really heavy. So the rice harvesters and the like. So a man will be able to carry, but a woman in the field is not able to carry it. So looking at the labor, how can we make this equipment more friendlier to women that they can carry also? Yeah, things that are maybe not necessarily, that's what I'm looking at, the particular needs and the constraints. Rice harvesters. Also, for example, even something when you're calling for meetings, what are the timings? Is it convenient for a woman to both do the reproductive duties as well as the productive duties? And even things a little set up, for example, you find, like the way Kassim was saying, access to credit facilities, you realize mostly they are trainings. But the times that are there and the distance, a woman is not able to participate. And they miss out of these really nice intentional policies and measures that are there, but particular needs are not being taken care of so that they are able to attend. So it could look like, you'll realize that in most organizations, meetings are now held closer to households. You'll go to where the farmers are rather than having it at a central place. Because having it there, you'll realize it's only men who are coming. Such small things, because not small, such seemingly small things that would really enable both men and women.
Such simple things.
Exactly, to equally contribute.
That would make a big difference.
You know, I'm listening to you, and this is what I'm thinking. If all these things are done, or at least we begin the journey, that family unit can take care of its nutritional needs. But let's look at how this would work within a community. And then let me ask the question, for instance, who feeds the people in the urban areas? Because we clearly don't farm. Okay. And how can the production units and setups in the rural communities connect with the urban so that the things that we speak of are actually achieved beyond feeding the family unit and the community? The commercial element then comes in, because there is a whole population of people who don't produce and yet need the same.
Exactly. And that now you're bringing in the really helpful but bigger topic in terms of rural-urban linkages and the markets, because it's not only at farm level, because you can produce, but also if you have the economic access and the two are connected, what is produced in rural areas can easily reach, as you're saying, the majority who are here, who are not producing, but we need the food that is being produced.
I look at a simple thing that I have participated in, where the food I eat, I don't necessarily buy in Nairobi. It is transported, and with modern transportation and tuk-tuks and boda, the food will actually arrive at my house. From the time it is transported from wherever, I'm not going to say where, it gets to Nairobi, it gets to me. Now, it is that I'm thinking of. Because the person who produces it sees the benefit, so they are encouraged to produce it.
Yeah.
And if they can produce one thing and I say, is it possible to produce this because I need it? It is then possible. And then there are people who actually are in the business of trading with those very things that I get directly, as an example. This ecosystem where production goes beyond just consumption, but is able to give you that additional income that enables you to do other things, Is this a goal that can be attained? Because from the micro situation that I'm describing, I'm looking at a community setup and how a community organization, community organized, and how this can actually boost the very, very process that we're talking about, which seems to have dimmed over the time when it comes to production in areas where food can actually be produced.
Would you like to start, Kassim? Or would you like to start?
Yeah, so I know food production happens primarily in the rural areas. And then he was talking about those of us who are in the city do not engage in, say, food production a lot. But I know I'll mention on what we are also doing. You'll find that when the food comes from the rural areas to the urban areas, so sometimes the food could be there in the market, but now access to that food in terms of affording, at what cost is it? So is something else that is hindering some people in achieving what we call the nutrition security. And what can be done basically to the people in the rural areas who engage in production, and even to motivate them to do more, is, for instance, subsidy in terms of fertilizer, the seeds and all that. So if that is done, it means that the people in the rural areas will be able to produce more. And even what comes to the market will be at a lower price. And people in the urban areas can also afford and access the food. And then at the end of it all, then we will be realizing that goal of food and nutrition security. Yes.
Can we end hunger? Both of you? I know you wanted to maybe do a rebuttal to, or rather a continuation of what he was saying. But as you do that, can you just tell us, can we end hunger? Kenya, the region, the world?
I'd say yes, that's the goal. That's the big picture we want. On our way there, I'd say we will alleviate as we go ahead, which would actually still be ideal, because as you see the numbers, you can go back, retrogress, but ideally alleviate on our way to end. So yes, but it's some micro goals that are needed for us to reach at the big goal. Yeah, it's like saying I'll run at a marathon and you've never even run a 10K.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm curious, I'm not very pleased with the number we are globally. And I'm just curious to understand what can we do as a country to move a little, at least closer to minimizing it to the lowest or to the end of it. Hunger, I mean, as Kenya, because we have the northeastern part of it, we have the eastern part of Kenya, etc. So what do you think we'd do as a country to alleviate hunger or even do better than we have in the past years?
Okay. Among the very many factors, I'd say the goal for the 2024, which would be if really achieved in terms of the gender justice and the climate resilience, that would really help us to get there. How does that look like? For the gender justice, the aspects, there are three, we normally call them the 3 R's. So one of them is recognitional justice around that. So just being aware, for example, like this discussion, raising awareness around it, and knowing that we are not at the same starting point, because sometimes you're neutral and that's not the situation, because somebody could be, a particular group could be really struggling, they have needs and constraints, but maybe their voices are not being amplified, they're not able to speak out, or maybe they don't have advocates. So that's one aspect, recognitional. Another element is redistributional now. So where there are more challenges, what can be done to, for example, if it's only we have 10 oranges, how do we redistribute that? Maybe a child would need more as compared to an adult. So that's the idea, the opportunities that are there and the resources. And then lastly is representational equity around that. So that's also now closing the gender gap. That will really take us forward in terms of even political representation. Who is at the decision-making seat?
Indeed.
Yeah. Is it only I'm not saying just men and women, because there's intersectional, looking at the various aspects, education level, but can all these groups be represented when the pie is being cut?
Sure.
So that could really get us there. And then the second element that was focusing on that is the climate resilience. Resilience is ability to bounce back. So one of the aspects is enhancing the capacity? Are we able to anticipate change? How are we able to recover around that? And what can we do to better work around this climate change that is not
sure
reversible?
Alleviation towards ending hunger is not a conversation that we can limit to an hour. Unfortunately, it's over years and years of many things to be done, and sadly our time has come to an end this morning, but I do believe that is something that we need to keep talking about, keep the awareness right here, at nose level, to keep discussing some of these matters. But we thank you for joining us this morning on this conversation. Dr. Mary Ngendo Kanui is an International Rice Research Institute member and Senior Technical Advisor. Kassim Lupao for Health and Nutrition at Concern Worldwide has been our guest this hour. Thank you so much for sharing with us this morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.